Hello everyone. Welcome to Tea Time. I'll be your host today. My name is Michelle Talamo, and we have a very exciting program for you. We'll be speaking about getting out the vote, why it's important for you in Bergen County. Our guest tonight is John Mitchell, former freeholder of Bergen County. Welcome, John.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Michelle. Thank you very much.
John, we want to talk about why it's so important to Bergen County residents as well as other county residents, what it means for them on the county level. Can you give us some feedback, please, and information on why it's so important at the county level to get out? Most of our viewers look at it from local for their town, and of course we do have the state senator election coming up. So could you give us some information from your perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Every year I'm frustrated by the fact that, about 38% voted in the last election. There were many elections through the county that came down to just a few votes. I'm an example of that. I ran for Freeholder last year, received 97,000 votes, and lost by 68 votes. And for those of you that are good at math, that's 0.007% difference between my winning and losing an election. Aside from that, there are many important issues that people should be out there paying attention to in terms of, and certainly at the county level.
So we have a county executive election that's up on the county level. We have two freeholders from each party that will be out there looking for the vote, freeholder candidates, against two of the incumbents. And then we have also, our senator.
Correct.
Which will be out there, and we also have a congressional. So it really is important for people to get out, and it can make a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. And in the times that we live, as a former politician and perhaps a future politician, we do a lot of polling, and we ask people here in Bergen County, what is the most important issue to you? And every year, the polls come back unanimously, and it says that property taxes are much too high here in Bergen County. And it's important that you get the people that you want into office that can reduce our property taxes, because what's happening with the high taxes, businesses are leaving, there's more unemployment than we would really want. So your voice counts. You need to get out there and have your voice be heard.
It's a pity if people don't get out, because other people are going to make that decision for them. And if someone else is making the decision on who's going to run the government, you really lose your voice. You have nothing to say unless you click that lever or fill out an advance vote by mail application. Now, when's the deadline to register, John?
Well, I wanted to give you 3 dates, Michelle. You have to register, the last day to register is October the 14th. And the last day to vote by mail is October 28th. And I should mention Election Day, of course, is on November the 4th.
Now, can people go into the office, to the county office, and register at a later date? Are there any exceptions to that rule?
Generally not. Generally not. You have a thing where on Election Day, there's the thing called provisional ballots. We don't have enough time today to go through all the nuances of that. But I would strongly recommend your audiences to follow the date. Registration by October 14th, mail-in ballot by the 28th, and then certainly vote on November the 4th.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the county and the importance of that, how large is that budget in dollars and cents for people to actually understand what it means for their vote?
Well, the county budget, and many people are amazed when I give them this, is about $500 million annually. And it represents about 10%, thereabouts, of your property tax bill. So it's pretty significant.
So we could have a real dent in your property taxes if you're voting wisely, looking at the issues, and deciding who's going to best be the steward of your tax money.
Unquestionably. And as I mentioned, last year only 38% of the registered voters came out to vote. And frankly, it's a pet peeve of mine when I listen to people that talk about, well, why don't you do this in the county? Why don't you do that in the county? And it turns out they never voted. I mean, it's really silly.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, when we talk about the county, I know where you were, as a freeholder, you were reaching out to all different people. You were reaching out to people across the aisle, reaching out to people in very diverse groups. Give me a little bit of your philosophy as how you looked at your role, because I think that will help people understand what a freeholder does. And I think a lot of people are not quite sure about that.
Well, not to be confused with freeloader, which I hear from time to time, but you know, the term freeholder goes back actually to the founding of our country. At the time, you know, prior to the ratification of the Constitution, of course we were ruled by England, and the king, of course, was the ruler of our lands, the King of England. But what he would do would set up certain individuals that would take over parcels of his land, do the legislation of the land, and for free. So therefore, that's how the term freeholder came about. It was a very common term in the colonies back in the late 1700s, but only New Jersey has retained the title of freeholder. In other jurisdictions, generally it's county commissioner is the most common example. But as a freeholder, the major job is that we control the purse strings, that $500 million that we talked about. We make decisions on spending. Essentially, it's the same process as you see with the president and the Congress, whereas the county executive here in Bergen County would present the budget to the freeholders. We would hold hearings with each of the department heads, you know, and when I was a budget chairman, I introduced make sure to go line by line and ask the questions about why they have to make these expenditures. During my first year, it was the first time in almost a quarter century that we actually cut the budget, and then we did it 2 years in a row while I was freeholder chairman and certainly budget chairman.
Is that continuing, or are we starting to see
it is not
an escalation? Okay.
It is
so
not.
We may be back to where we started.
Not quite as bad. But it's been creeping up. There's plenty of ways, in my judgment, that they should continue looking for ways to cut costs.
And if people are inclined to want to let the current freeholders know how they feel, they can go online on the internet, look up where the freeholder website is.
Right.
And they can communicate that way. And they can also communicate, because the freeholders have their meetings on the first and third Wednesday. Is that right?
That is correct. The first and third Wednesday of every month. I think there might be only one meeting during the summertime, but generally it's the first and third Wednesday, yes.
So they can go to Hackensack and they can go up to the podium and they can voice their concerns, correct?
And many people do.
And many people do. That's a good thing. I've seen them televised on cable, on local cable as well.
Yes.
So they don't have to leave the comfort of their home to be educated. Tell us a little bit more about your outreach. I know that you were reaching out to other diverse groups when you were a freeholder, and tell us a little bit about that as well.
Bergen County is changing. You know, we have a tremendous influx of Asians, certainly a tremendous influx from South Korea. There's a growing population of Latinos coming into Bergen County, and even though the African Americans have been here for a very, very long time, their population is growing. And I have found that, you know, when people would call me on the phone, you know, I didn't make a distinction of who was calling me. If they had an issue or a problem, I didn't care who it was. I was going to try to fix the problem. But certainly for our newer immigrants, certainly those coming from South Korea, there was an issue sometimes with language. So I made it a point that I actually picked up a few phrases and words that I could start the communication. But, you know, speaking, whether it be Latino, African American, Asian, Koreans, it doesn't matter. I mean, I would go out and I would talk to them about what are their needs, and there's a commonality. what they want in their particular areas, they would want businesses to come in and flourish. They want to retain the businesses they have. They want to attract new businesses because they realize that that creates jobs. And, you know, getting that piece of it done, and there's the third piece to this that's most important. That, of course, is the education for their children. And I don't care what area I would go into. Those three components, build businesses, create jobs, and make sure my children get a good education. I don't care what color you are. Everybody wants to accomplish that.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a high priority for the parents who want their children to do a little bit better than they've done, and recognize that you need to have a good education in Bergen County to have that. I know also there was an initiative at one point to join the Bergen County Police.
Right.
With the Sheriff's Office. Can we enlighten our audience on that? They may have not even heard about that along the way.
Well, that's an ongoing issue here in Bergen County. I took the position that I felt as though that there would be significant taxpayer savings for that to occur. There's been some disagreement at the county level. But just when I left, a bipartisan resolution was passed to do that merger. Right now, it's caught up in the courts, and there's some issue about it. But I'm confident that eventually this will happen. It wasn't exactly the way I would have liked it done. I would have had the process that I put forward would have had deeper tax cuts earlier on. I worked across the aisle with my Democrat friends. They just thought it was a little too strong right up front. So we came to terms and we sort of picked a middle ground. But the bottom line is that there will be taxpayer savings once that comes about. Now the most important thing too is that, you know, for saving dollars, I wanted to make sure that public safety was never in jeopardy. And both my plan and the compromise plan, public safety is paramount and still would be maintained.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now we also have the election coming up for our Congress Individuals.
Right.
We have Mr. Congressman Pascrell.
Correct.
Will be going up against Dr. Deirdre Paul,
That is
and
correct.
she is the candidate. And there will be a debate between them in Englewood, I think on the 27th.
That's correct. I believe it's going to be a Community Baptist church. And it's a beautiful, I've been to a Community Baptist church a bunch of times. It's a perfect setting for this type of foray. And I'm anxious. I'm a big supporter, if you don't mind me saying, of Deirdre Paul. And here's a real opportunity for the people in Bergen County and certainly in her district, District 9, to really get to know her. So
yeah, that's interesting. It'll be in Englewood, correct?
In Englewood, that's correct.
All right, that'll be something great to watch out for. And then, of course, we also have Congressman Garrett.
Right.
And I think his debate is going to be on the 20th of October. And I think that's in Ridgewood, but I'm not quite sure of the location.
I think you're correct. It is in Ridgewood. The exact address, I'm not sure, but you know, these days, just Google it. You know.
Yeah, the Jewish Federation, I think, is hosting that, right? Yes,
but I think it's in. I think it's going to be. Well, I thought it was in Paramus, but nonetheless, in the magic age of Google, just find out where it is.
Yeah, that'll be great. Now, when we talk about other issues surrounding, I guess, people who are in Bergen County, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that we are very close to Manhattan. And we've all been hearing about terrorism. We've all been hearing about ISIS and the threats. What do you know that you could share about Bergen County's readiness to be available and be in action should something happen to us close by?
Well, it was one of the things I received regular briefings on all security issues that were occurring here in Bergen County, and you know, in my experience, that there weren't any specific threats that were occurring. But I can tell you that the readiness, and it's more complicated than a lot of people realize because of the interface with all of the different law enforcement agencies, right from the local to the county to the state to the federal, and then across state lines, of course, given our location close to New York, which everyone still believes is a major target of any terrorist threat. So the people that are involved with this at all levels of law enforcement and emergency management is just, I'll tell you, they are dedicated people, and they're working very hard for our safety. And I feel very safe. God forbid something does happen and we need to recover from it, we have the right people in place.
Okay, do they interface with the towns at a certain level, with the mayors of the towns in Bergen County?
On a regular basis.
Oh, they do.
On a regular basis, and they have to. And particularly when, I'll give you an example, it wasn't terrorism, but certainly Hurricane Sandy, when that occurred. And, that was an emergency where, lives were at stake and so forth. And the coordination was remarkable. And, nothing is ever perfect, and you learn from the mistakes, and each and every time you're going to do it better than the next time. But even for, terrorism, we had certainly when the Super Bowl was here in Bergen County last year, there was a real concern about terrorism and everything else. And I was part of the planning meetings before the Super Bowl, and it was heartwarming for me as a citizen to see that we got the professionals we do taking care of us.
Yeah, it went very smoothly. I can't say that there was anything that was out of the ordinary when it happened. It went very well. So I'm glad to hear that. Now, from your perspective, what else should Bergen County residents be focused on? We've talked about the election. We've talked about the role of a freeholder. What else goes on in the county that people should be aware of? I know we had Overpeck Park. That was a big undertaking, and there was a lot of overages spent. So that was quite a debate as to the value for the money. What else is going on in the county that people should be aware of? Well,
everything. Again, and I'm going to go back to my point about keeping property taxes down. I think that's a very important thing. But just sort of tangentially from that, there's been a lot of discussion recently about whether or not the county should still run Bergen Regional Medical Center. And this is a facility that takes in many of our low-income people that can't afford medical care. It does a great job also for helping people with alcoholism or drug dependency and so on, and they do a great job there. And the question is whether or not this is a facility that should be continued to be run by government, or should there be privatized. And there's a study that, as I understand it, going on right now to come up with that decision. So, and it's a very contentious issue because people are concerned if it's privatized, will our poor still be able to have access to it and receive the care that they get right now? On the other side of the argument is, well, is this a business government should be involved in? There's many of us, including myself, that sometimes I don't believe that government has the wherewithal to really run an efficient hospital. But at the same time, there's always a concern. We live in a very litigious society, and things could go wrong at the hospital. And if there's lawsuits, and if the county loses the lawsuit, it's the taxpayer that's, covering those costs. So these are all the issues that are going to be debated. I'm very anxious to see what the outcome of this study would be. And and I urge your listeners, your viewers, to pay attention to this, because this is a major issue for Bergen County for now and into the future.
And who's overseeing that study?
It's the county executive, of course.
The county executive?
Yes,
okay.
Kathleen Donovan.
Okay, is there a timeline for that?
I understand that it's a matter of months that the study is going to be completed. I think they only started in fact, they're about to start, or maybe just started, but it's at the very early stages right now.
Oh, that's an interesting.
And it's an opportunity for people now to, you were talking before, Michelle, to attend the Freeholder meetings and to talk to the freeholders about what their thoughts, the citizens' thoughts on whether or not should it stay the same or should privatization come in. So it's going to be a very key issue, and you're going to see it. A lot of the newspapers are going to be following it very closely.
Yeah, it's nice to know that the freeholders are so accessible that you can go to the meeting, you can hear what is on the docket, what the agenda is, what's being said, what's being approved. I have to tell you that whenever I've looked at the agenda, my eyes will be fixed on the amount of money that was being, passed through and being, approved or not approved, based on the merit of the expense.
No, it's very significant. It's your money. It's the taxpayers' money is being spent. But I will say to the public that it really works. Sending emails or letters or showing up at the meetings. The old expression is that the squeaky wheel, gets the grease. It absolutely works. I know that for myself, where I was on the fence on a particular issue, if I saw that there was public support to get me off the fence, it usually changed my mind.
Well, I know that there was a big initiative coming out of the freeholders back when you were there talking about Common Core, and they came out with a resolution against Common Core.
Yes, we did, and I'm proudly say that it was a bipartisan resolution. Myself and Freeholder Voss, who's a Democrat, we got together and we found that we were both against Common Core. We worked with our fellow Republicans and fellow Democrats to get them on board, because Joan and I both had some expertise, and because we have been following this issue for some time, we got them up to speed. And for the first time ever here in New Jersey, that a Freeholder board passed a resolution condemning Common Core.
Yeah, I was happy to see that. It just seemed like Common Core is just not a good fit for educating the next generation. It's quite confusing. The math is boggling to the parents, so it's very difficult to get your hands around that. And I know teachers are not too happy with Common Core either.
I have two children that are educators, and they're pulling their hair out of the prospect of having to work on the Common Core. But I've had more dealings with parents, and where the parents want to get involved with the children doing their homework every night, and it drives them nuts, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, the curriculum itself, and then certainly to try to now have a parent come in, help a third grader, and trying to relearn something that just doesn't make sense is ridiculous in my judgment. And hopefully there's enough support to get rid of this nonsense.
Yeah, it's all so cumbersome, and it sounds like it's almost every child left behind, instead of doing something that will, bring the kids up to speed. We know that in America we're losing, status on our education, and that other countries are passing us by. And taking on Common Core is just, as I would look, as another nail in the education curriculum, where I don't see the value of it. It becomes very complicated with a simple subtraction calculation, that you subtract 53 from 85, and the calculation is this long rather than 3 lines.
It's silly, but it's more of it's more of this Washington think that we have. They know better. They are going to teach us how to raise our children, and it's just ridiculous that we have to deal with this. It's craziness.
Now, John, you're a businessman. What did you see? Did you see any parallels in business and politics? What would you say was parallel, and what would you say was completely different in the world of business versus politics?
Well, when I was elected freeholder, my fellow freeholders felt as though that because I come from the business world, that I would be good to be the budget chairman. And I said, fine. So my first order of business was to meet with the treasurer of Bergen County. He didn't know me, I didn't know him. I think we heard of each other a little bit, and we sat down. And the first thing the treasurer said to me, he says, Freeholder, he says, I know you've done plenty of budgets in the business world, but government budgeting is very different. I said, well, let me ask you this question. We only have a certain amount of money coming in, so therefore we can only spend a certain amount of money. He said to me, you're a quick learner. So that was the answer. So, that's the essence of it. I mean, there's not a big difference. Now, of course, there were certain things that, I was amazed at. For instance, at the county level, my old time in business, myself and my subordinates and my superiors, we all got performance reviews. And just seeing how you do, they don't do it in government. I was shocked by this. I had then asked at one of the meetings, I won't name the name of the person, but one of the department heads came before the Freeholder board, and he was trying to convince us about a certain spending that he wanted to do. It was a lot of money. And I said to him, well, what is the ROI on this? He had no idea what I was talking about. So,
return on investment.
Return on investment, and he did not know what return on investment was. So, it was early on in my term, so I knew that, I had my work cut out for me just to get them on board. And then, of course, I was accused to some extent of not being in favor of many of the good government programs, because I asked a lot of questions. And I said to them, I got a whole group of them together at one point, and we just sat down and I said, look, let me just tell you, I like all your programs, but let me just tell you where I'm coming from. If we could spend $1 now to help one person, well, why don't we figure out a way to spend that same dollar and help 3 people? I said, all I'm talking about is bringing efficiencies to government to make that whatever government's supposed to provide for people, we do it in the most cost-effective way.
John, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the local elections, and that's where people in their own town can have a large impact on their mayor and council if they go to those meetings. How do you see that? Oh,
absolutely, and frankly, this is where most of your property taxes are spent, is at the local level. So it behooves people to get out there and have their voices heard.
And speak perhaps to also the Board of Ed people, because they are really also controlling a lot of money that's being spent and winds up in the taxes as well.
Most of the money.
So anyway, everyone, thanks to John. John, you've been a great guest. Really appreciate
you very much.
it. New Jersey Tea Party Coalition, njteapartycoalition.com. Come and visit us. We'd appreciate having you. And please let us know your feedback. Thank you very much.